Indigenous, First Nations, Indian, Native American, Aboriginal. What is the correct name to call us? Watch this video to find out how to talk about Indigenous people so you can finally understand what is the best way to refer to Native people and know when to use which name and why. What is the right name for Indigenous people? If you're wondering what the right name is for Indigenous people, then we're here to explain the most common names to address Native or Indigenous people of Canada. This way you can address your Native friends correctly or anyone else that you meet without offending them. By the end of this video, you will have a full understanding of how to correctly address Native people and when it's most appropriate to use each of the names that are synonymous with the Indigenous people of Canada. How do you properly address Indigenous people? We've been asked this question so many times, and we finally collected some answers from friends, family, and other resources. We're going to talk about the meaning of each of the names, when it is used, and who prefers to be called that name. When do you use the word Indigenous? What does Indigenous mean? Indigenous people mean the original people of Canada. And in Canada, the Indigenous people encompasses the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. Indigenous is used across the world to describe species of people, plants, and living things that have originated in that area. Now, who prefers Indigenous? Younger generations self-identify as Indigenous, as well as urban Native people usually feel the most comfortable being addressed as Indigenous. Now on to number 2. When is it most correct to address people as First Nations? What does First Nation mean, and why would you use First Nations to address someone? First Nations, like Métis and Inuit, are a subset of Indigenous people. First Nations has been used since the Assembly of First Nations decided that they wanted the reserves to be called First Nations instead of Indian reserves. Nations are used when talking about various tribes as well. For example, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Oneida Nation, Dakota Nation, etc. Nations are groups of people, and the Native First Nations are the groups of people that were here first. Now, who prefers the term First Nation? Government organizations generally use the term First Nation as a matter of political correctness. Now on to number 3. What about calling Native people Indians? What does it mean to address people as Indian? Indian refers to people from India. However, in the beginning, Indigenous people were called Indians. When the settlers arrived to North America from Europe, they thought that they were in India, and the name just stuck. In Canada, it was most often used from the Indian Act. It was put into place by the Canadian government to integrate the Indigenous people into the culture, lifestyle, and society of the European settlers. Now, who prefers the term Indian? The elderly generation actually like to refer to themselves as Indian, and that is because when they were being raised, they were told from a very young age that they were Indian, and so that's what they've been used to for their entire lives. What is the most common name to refer to Native people in your area? Please share with us in the comments below. Now we've looked at the first 3 names in addressing Native people and who actually prefers to be called those names, which are 1. Indigenous, 2. First Nation, and 3. Indian. Now on to number 4. When is it correct to address people as Native American? What does Native American mean? Native American refers to the native people of all of North America. It is most often used in the United States of America, where Indigenous people are also referred to as American Indians. Now, who prefers Native American? More Indigenous Americans from the United States of America actually prefer this name compared to Indigenous Canadians. When is it correct to address people as Aboriginal? Firstly, what does Aboriginal mean? Aboriginal is synonymous with Indigenous and First Nations. They all mean the same thing. Government organizations have used the term Aboriginal in a lot of their communications, policies, laws, and programs. Now, who prefers the term Aboriginal? Government organizations and educational institutions typically prefer the term Aboriginal, but it is actually becoming out of date to refer to Native people as this. And the trend is sort of moving more towards Indigenous. Now let's add some context to this. What generally matters most is the intent behind addressing someone. There is no general rule or consensus as to which name is most appropriate. So it is best to just ask who you're speaking with if they have a preference or not. So now after watching this video, you should know exactly how to correctly address Native people. Also, when it's most appropriate to use each of the different names that are synonymous with Indigenous people of Canada. So you can feel confident about talking to Indigenous people and helping others address Native people correctly as well. If you are wanting to learn more about the various sacred medicines in the Indigenous culture or the smudging process, then download our free guide at the link in the description below. If you like this video, please let us know by hitting the like button. Tell us what you liked about it in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.